We're back with another unboxing. This time it's a virtual unboxing. Thought we'd try something different. What we're going to do today is unbox the Cisco Cloud Services Router 1000V. So that's the CSR 1000V. This is not a physical hardware platform. It's a virtual appliance that runs on a hypervisor. Often, it's targeted to be run on the cloud hypervisor. But here today, we're going to run it on a local ESXi hypervisor that's actually nested inside of VMware Workstation. So I thought this was interesting because it's something that anybody can do using the free trial licenses, just like I've done now. So what I'm going to do is walk through this a little bit, and I'll put some links in the description of the video to give people the opportunity to do the same type of installation, and then play around with the product afterwards, and learn something new, or evaluate the product to see if it's something that's right for your environment. So basically, the CSR 1000V, as I said, is a virtual router. It runs the same code essentially as the ASR series of hardware routers. Cisco needed a product that would be viable in a service provider cloud. Typically you're not going to be able to ship a Cisco hardware router to Amazon or Azure or any other number of cloud providers. So this is runs the same operating system, iOS XE. Runs basically has the same feature set as the ASR router, and so that's their way to get into the cloud enterprise market. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a quick look at Cisco. We'll show you the product. As some of you know, there's a lot of ways to get around on the Cisco website, but I'll show you one way to get there. And from here, you can do you can go to download software. What I found is there's a number of versions, obviously, like there are with all software releases. But the one that's available with my CCO ID was the 311S, and I went with the 311 4S. And hopefully, if you have a CCO ID, you can get there. That's the what appears to be targeted as a trial version. I'm actually going to work with Cisco to determine why I don't have entitlement to get to the latest software. So this demo is going to be based on the 311 software, but you may have access to other versions as well. So that's the Cisco site. Let me go back here, and obviously, as most of you know, there are typically configuration guides. It's pretty light here because I think what they want you to do is look at the iOS XE configuration guides for the details. So what we have here is really isolated to CSR 1000V specific installation and features, as opposed to the overall feature set, which you could look at the iOS XE general documentation. So it appears that we've got a trial license here, so that should work for you. Obviously, you need a CCO ID. You can sign up for that. Also under VMware downloads, I'm just going to be using the VMware vSphere suite, and I've got a vCenter server, and I've got ESXi. And then, as I said, I'm actually nesting that inside of VMware Workstation. All of those products have trial periods that you can utilize to recreate this lab for yourself. There's also a free trial on Amazon Web Services. So if you want to go that route, you can deploy it using Amazon Machine Image in AWS. Okay, so we'll go take a look here in vCenter. Some of you may have noticed that I'm on a Mac. This is actually the C# client. I'm running this on VMware Fusion. This is a Unity app, so this is actually running on Windows 10, but it's appearing as a local app here. I was unable to get the VMware client integration plugin running with Chrome or Firefox. I saw that there's been some issues with 64-bit browser support. So I'm going to check in with VMware this week and see exactly what's going on. But basically, you can install the plugin, but neither browser was showing that plugin as installed. So um, basically, the product ships there are a number of ways, but I'm going to use the OVF, which is a packaged install, which you can deploy. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy the OVF here. And I've already downloaded the software from the location I showed you earlier on Cisco.com. And I'm going to name this guy CSR 1000V01 because I'm going to create a second one later. And I'm just going to do thin provisioning because this lab has a very small disk. So out of the box, it gives you 3 gigabit Ethernet interfaces. These map to, you map these to VMware port groups of your choosing. I've already created some VMware port groups, and I can show those to you as well. But cloud is going to simulate your internal cloud network. Internet obviously is the outside, and lab is just my connection from to the router. So basically the management interface. I'm going to switch these up so that we have the gig 1 is our lab interface. Now here is this is some template included in the OVF that allows you to do some pre-configuration. I'm not going to use this. I'm just going to take the defaults. Prime Network Services Controller, I believe is the name of that PNSC. If you're like me, you have a hard time keeping track of all of Cisco's cloud initiatives. I think this was recently rolled into a new product, Cloud Fabric Interconnect, I believe. So who knows how long this PNSC is going to be around. I don't know if there's going to be any more new versions. So I'm just going to skip this, and here's your summary of what it's about to do. And we'll go ahead and do that. We'll do it separately. The actual OVF deployment is pretty quick, so we can watch that happen. And then we're going to go ahead and power it on. And that's a little bit more lengthy, so I'll go through a few of the features during that time period, and then I may pause the video because there's not much to see there. Pretty much, you're not actually going to do any inputs. It's going to give you some Linux style bootloader selection options, but there's no requirement to make any changes there. Okay, so this is winding down now. I actually had wandered fairly far away from my access point on the 5 gigahertz band, and it was kind of slow, so I restarted it on 2.4 gigahertz, and it ran, it takes less than a minute. So that's deployed. So let's take a quick look at our networking. As I mentioned before, I've got 3 port groups, each tied to a VNIC. They're actually all bridged to the same. Well, the lab is bridged to my local network, and the other 2 are on isolated vSwitches, just to test interconnectivity between the devices. So let's go ahead and we will open the console of this device. We can watch it boot. As I mentioned earlier, it does take some time. There's no input required. So what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about the product, and we'll watch this in the background. And like I said, I may trim some of the time off here. So Hypervisors runs on ESXi, Citrix Zen Server, KVM, Hyper-V, and also, as I mentioned, Amazon Web Services, Amazon Machine Image format. It runs anywhere from 10 megabits per second to 10 gigabits per second. Feature sets will impact the performance. Full feature set isn't going to get you. You're not going to run at 10 gigabits per second. Depending on the throughput and feature sets, you're going to use somewhere between 1 and 8 vCPUs, 4 and 16 gigs of RAM. They all require 8 gigs of disk and 2 or more VNICs. Obviously, you can't really route. Well, I guess if you trunked, you could route with 1 VNIC, but 2 or more VNICs are required. Like I said before, it runs iOS XE software. That's iOS, a version of iOS that's designed to run symmetrical multiprocessor systems, multi-core CPUs. The idea there is that instead of iOS being the operating system, iOS is a process that runs in the operating system, and then you can schedule various threads to different cores, so you can get multi-processing in parallel. So iOS runs actually as iOSD, the iOS daemon. Gives you also control and data plane separation. So that's really very similar to ASR. So you got 4 packages, IP base. That's where you get your basic networking, your routing protocols like EIGRP, OSPF, BGP, etc. GRE, VRF Lite, first hop redundancy protocols. Then there's also a security feature set, which gives you your VPN gateway. It's got full VPN support, IPsec, DMVPN, EasyVPN, FlexVPN. Also has a zone-based firewall feature. Then there's AppX, which gives you web content redirection, WCCP, VXLAN. We'll talk a little more about that. MPLS support, Lisp, OTV, AVC, application visibility and control. And then there's the AX feature set, which is just a combination of all the above. One feature, the MPLS, it actually can extend the provider's MPLS cloud into your enterprise, your cloud environment. It also, as we mentioned, offers some layer 2 and layer 3 extension features. OTV, overlay transport virtualization. That's the Cisco's data center interconnect protocol. It allows you to extend your networks at layer 2 across between data centers without, unlike trunking a VLAN, it's not going to propagate your bump traffic, your broadcast unknown unicast traffic. So it's gonna reduce traffic overhead as well as isolate failure domains better than just a straight up VLAN tagging would do. Also supports Lisp, locator ID separation protocol. Basically, what Lisp does is it takes your IP address, which under standard IPv4 really designates both your identity and your location, and actually breaks it out so that you have an endpoint identifier, which is your identity, and then you have your RLOC, which is your routing locator, which designates the location of your device. So the big advantage here is workload mobility. Imagine a scenario pretty common with cloud deployments where you have a VM in the enterprise or in the cloud and you need to move it, but you don't want to change the IP addresses. With Lisp, the network, you can migrate the VM without changing the IP, and the network will still be able to route to that device intelligently, send the traffic to wherever that device lives. So that's the big advantage of Lisp. All right, so I'm seeing here, we're at this point. What I've noticed with this feature release is that it hangs here for a bit and then gives a trace back, then it reboots, and then you get to an actual router prompt. So I'm not sure if that's a peculiarity of this particular code. Like I said, I will grab the later code, most recent code soon, and double check that. But I expect we may see some traceback messages, and then the router is going to reboot, and then it'll return the prompt to me. But we're still a couple minutes away from that. Another useful cloud technology, VXLAN gateway. So this router supports VXLAN routing. VXLAN's where you can greatly increase the amount of layer 2 segmentation over traditional VLANs, where you had the 4096 available VLANs minus the reserved VLANs. Here with VXLANs, it's in the millions. and it does support VXLAN gateway routing. So yeah, so I guess I should also mention that Cisco positions this router um, as a for use in a multi-tenant cloud. However, you're probably going to have an instance of the CSR per tenant. It's not going to be necessarily a multi-tenant product that the cloud provider installs. It's going to be something where the particular tenant can install it, and it gives you're the tenant, it gives you the ability to um, control your routing edge using the same technology you're likely using in your enterprise. You know, you're going to be familiar with the product or the feature set, the commands, etc. So you're not going to be using, whoever your cloud provider is, you can really uh, have the same administration and the same feature set for each. So I think that covers it. I think when this thing completes, we'll run through some verification commands, and we'll go from there. Okay, so the install completed. It did do the tracebacks and then rebooted, and here we are with what looks like something you would expect as a router normally boots up. So we're just going to go ahead and we'll run some basic validation commands. So Cisco iOS XE version 3.11.04s, license level limited, no valid license found. Let's show platform software VNIC interface mapping. So this is interesting because obviously when you're building the VM in Hypervisor, obviously iOS needs to tie into the VNICs that the Hypervisor applies. So this is where you can see what that mapping is. You can look at these MAC addresses and then go back into your your hypervisor management, and you can determine which interfaces they're tied to. So also let's take a quick look at license details. So this is a premium valuation. Looks like we got 8 weeks, 4 days. So what's that like? Maybe 60 day eval. And one thing to note is Cisco is playing with the licensing somewhere around 3.12, 3.13. The licensing change. So depending on which version you use, you may need to grab a smart license from cisco.com/go/license. Um, it just depends which version you're going to be trialing. And in case you think that you're going to be using this in production, show platform hardware throughput level. This should be pretty sobering. 2.5 megabits per second is the throughput level that's associated when you're in evaluation mode. So it's not really going to be useful for production use, but it is useful to take a look at the feature set and lab it up before you deploy it. So what I'm going to do is I'll come back in a moment, and we will do some basic networking and just build a second CSR and validate that we can route. We have network connectivity between the two. Okay, I've gone ahead and deployed another CSR 1000. So we've got our two CSRs here. I'm going to launch the remote console for these devices. The way my MacBook is set up, I've got VMware Workstation, VM Fusion rather, and it acts as the remote console if you want versus using the web console. So that's what I'm using here. Okay, so I've got my two CSRs here, and I'm going to go ahead and put some basic configuration on here to allow remote accessibility and for further configuration. And we always want to use SSH versus Telnet for encrypted administration sessions with the network devices. And we'll go ahead and enable version 2. And then we're going to go ahead and put a basic configuration on our Ethernet interface that goes to the lab. We'll give it a description that includes the interface name. Give it an IP address that's on my local LAN segment here. And then enable the interface. We'll then go ahead and configure our virtual terminal interfaces to allow remote access via SSH. And tell the router to use local database, user database for authentication. And then we'll go ahead and create a username with privilege level 15 and a secret of the ever popular Cisco 123. And that should be what we need to access remotely. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a terminal session, and I'm going to remove the key that's stored for this host already, if there is one. My second router, okay. So now I should be able to SSH to this router and get a new key that I just generated there. Accept the key and enter our password incorrectly. I'll try again. And now we have our remote session, and I'll go ahead and save this config. Now we'll go ahead and repeat the process over here. Configure our interface. Virtual terminal sessions. Set up a username. And I'm going to go ahead and launch another terminal window. And we have our second session. So now let's go ahead and configure a second interface here. We'll go back briefly to our config here and look at our networking. So we've got a cloud interface and a lab interface and an internet interface. So let's just configure our cloud interface. And we'll go ahead and give it an internal address, 10.1.221.255.255.255.0. And it'll be easier if I'll use the SSH session down here instead on the other guy. we'll go ahead and confirm we can ping. Our interface just came up if you look at the console above, and you can see that's why we didn't get a response the first 2 times. And we'll go ahead and repeat over here. We'll ping the other way, 10.1.1.2.2.2, and we get an immediate response. We'll write our config, and that's it for now. Hey, if you made it this far, thank you very much. Please feel free to leave comments below. We love hearing feedback on things you like and things you'd like to see us do. And if you enjoyed the video, please like it and subscribe. Thanks a lot.